Zora Wilson sat stunned in the airport terminal as flight attendants scrambled around her in panic. Her phone rang incessantly, airline executives begging her to reconsider. 300 passengers stranded as every flight at the major hub remained grounded. Just hours before, those same airline staff had sneered, "First class? Not for people like you." Before we dive into this incredible story of justice and resilience, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed discrimination and wanted to see justice served. Get ready for a journey that will show you exactly what happens when powerful people underestimate a black woman who knows her worth. Zora Wilson embodied excellence in every sense of the word. Growing up in the rougher neighborhoods of Oakland, California, she had defied every expectation placed upon her. Her journey began with a scholarship to Stanford University, where she graduated summa cum laude with dual degrees in computer science and business administration. She followed this with an MBA from Harvard Business School, where professors still used her thesis on inclusive technology markets as required reading. By 35, Zora had transformed from a girl raised by a single mother working 3 jobs to the founder and CEO of Horizon Innovations, a technology company revolutionizing artificial intelligence applications in healthcare. Under her leadership, the company had grown from a small startup to a billion-dollar enterprise employing over 5,000 people worldwide. Despite her accomplishments, Zora never forgot her roots. She established scholarship programs for underprivileged youth, created technology training centers in low-income neighborhoods, and implemented hiring practices that made Horizon Innovations a leader in workforce diversity. Business journals regularly featured her on their covers, highlighting both her business acumen and her commitment to social change. On this particular Tuesday morning in April, Zora found herself facing an unexpected crisis. A competing firm had suddenly moved to undercut Horizon's groundbreaking deal with a Japanese healthcare consortium, a partnership worth billions that would bring affordable AI diagnostic tools to underserved communities across Asia. "We need you in Tokyo by tomorrow morning," her director of international relations had informed her during an emergency video call. "They're wavering after Meditech's offer. Your presence could make all the difference." Without hesitation, Zora instructed her executive assistant, Marcus Jenkins, to book her on the next available flight to Tokyo. Given the urgency and the 15-hour flight ahead, Marcus secured her a first-class ticket on Skyline Airlines, departing in 4 hours. "I've upgraded you to first class so you can work during the flight and arrive rested," Marcus explained, sending the confirmation to her phone. "I've also arranged for the driver to take you home to pack and then straight to the airport." Zora nodded appreciatively. The previous week had already been exhausting, 70-hour workdays negotiating with investors, refining their technology patents, and preparing for the Tokyo deal. As a black woman leading a major tech company, she constantly worked twice as hard to prove herself in an industry dominated by white men. Every presentation had to be flawless, every financial projection precise, every decision scrutinized far more intensely than those of her peers. "Thank you, Marcus," she replied, gathering her materials. "Have the team send me the updated proposal and competitor analysis. I'll review everything on the flight." As her driver navigated through downtown traffic toward her penthouse apartment, Zora mentally prepared for the challenges ahead. The Tokyo deal wasn't just another business opportunity. It represented Horizon's mission to democratize healthcare technology globally. She had personally championed the project's focus on accessibility for rural and underserved populations, something her competitors viewed as secondary to profit margins. In her apartment, Zora efficiently packed her suitcase with carefully selected outfits for the high-stakes meetings. Her wardrobe, like everything in her life, was strategic. Designer suits and dresses that conveyed authority and professionalism, selected to help navigate a business world that often judged her first by her appearance rather than her intelligence. As she placed her passport and company documents in her leather portfolio, Zora took a moment to glance at the framed photo on her desk, her grandmother standing proudly in front of the small beauty salon she had owned in Oakland during the
civil rights era.
"Never let them tell you where you belong," her grandmother had always told her. "Those seats are for everyone, not just some." With renewed determination, Zora headed back to the waiting car. The driver, Anthony, greeted her with respect that came from their 4 years of working together. "Big trip, Ms. Wilson?" he asked, placing her luggage in the trunk. Potentially life-changing, she replied, for millions of people who need better health care. As they approached the airport, Zora reviewed her boarding pass on her phone. Skyline Airlines Flight 782, First Class, Seat 2A. In just 16 hours, she would be in Tokyo, ready to secure a deal that could cement her company's global impact. What she couldn't know was that her journey would be derailed not by business competitors, but by something far more insidious. The same prejudice she had fought against her entire life. And that this time, her response would shake an entire industry to its core. Zora arrived at San Francisco International Airport with 2 hours to spare before her flight to Tokyo. The sleek terminal bustled with activity as she made her way to Skyline Airlines' premium check-in area, rolling her carry-on Rimowa suitcase. Beside her, dressed in a tailored Armani suit with subtle gold accessories, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo, she projected the confidence and authority that had become her professional signature. The premium check-in area featured plush carpeting, ambient lighting, and no lines, a stark contrast to the crowded economy check-in counters nearby. Zora approached the counter where a ticketing agent, a middle-aged white man whose name tag read Calvin Pierce, was typing on his computer. "Good afternoon," Zora greeted him professionally, placing her passport and phone with her digital boarding pass on the counter. Calvin glanced up, his friendly expression faltering momentarily as he took in her appearance. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he straightened his posture. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone noticeably cooler than the warm exchanges he had with previous passengers. "I'm checking in for the Tokyo flight, first class," Zora explained, sliding her passport forward. Calvin made no move to take her passport. Instead, he looked past her toward the regular check-in line. "First-class check-in is for first-class passengers only," he stated pointedly. "The regular check-in is over there." Zora maintained her composure. "Yes, I'm aware. I have a first-class ticket." She pulled up the confirmation on her phone and turned the screen toward him. Calvin reluctantly took her passport and began typing, his expression skeptical. "How did you obtain this ticket?" he asked, his tone implying something improper. "My executive assistant booked it through our corporate account," Zora replied evenly, though she felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach, the same tension she experienced whenever her legitimacy was questioned. "I'll need to see additional identification and your corporate card," Calvin demanded, something Zora noticed he hadn't asked of the white businessman who had checked in before her. As Zora reached for her wallet to provide her driver's license and corporate card, a white couple approached the adjacent counter. The female agent greeted them warmly, checking them in efficiently with minimal documentation. Zora watched from the corner of her eye as they were directed to the priority security line within minutes, their first-class status unquestioned. "Is there a problem?" Zora asked Calvin, who was now making a phone call while holding her documents. "Just following protocol for unusual bookings," he responded curtly. A flight attendant named Melissa Baker, as indicated by her name tag, approached from behind the counter. She and Calvin exchanged whispers, both glancing repeatedly at Zora. "Ms. Wilson, was it?" Melissa addressed her with artificial sweetness. "We have some concerns about your booking. First-class tickets on international flights are typically reserved for our frequent business travelers and premium members." "I'm a platinum member of your frequent flyer program," Zora stated, pulling up her digital membership card. "And I'm the CEO of Horizon Innovations, traveling for business." By now, other passengers were watching the interaction. Zora felt the familiar weight of being spectacle, something she had experienced countless times throughout her career, when her presence in exclusive spaces was deemed suspect. "Horizon Innovations?" Calvin repeated, his tone indicating he'd never heard of the billion-dollar company regularly featured in business news. "And you're claiming to be the CEO?" The word claiming hung in the air, sharp and accusatory. "I am the CEO," Zora corrected firmly. "You can verify that with a simple Google search. Now, I appreciate your thoroughness, but my flight departs soon, and I need to get through security." Melissa stepped closer. "Ma'am, there's no need to get upset, we're just doing our jobs." "I'm not upset," Zora replied calmly. "I'm simply requesting the service I've paid for." Calvin picked up a phone. I'm going to need to call security if you continue to be difficult." The threat was as clear as it was unjustified. Zora had raised neither her voice nor made any unreasonable demands. She had simply asked to board the flight she had purchased. "On what grounds would you call security?" Zora asked. "We have the right to deny boarding to any passenger who makes our staff uncomfortable," Melissa stated. "And right now, your attitude is concerning." A security officer appeared with surprising speed, suggesting he had been pre-alerted. "Is there a problem here?" the officer asked, directing his question to Calvin rather than Zora. "This woman is insisting on a first-class seat that we believe may have been obtained inappropriately," Calvin explained. "She's becoming agitated." Zora took a deep breath, recognizing the familiar tactic, painting a calm black person as angry or aggressive to justify mistreatment. "Officer," she addressed him directly, "I'm Zora Wilson, CEO of Horizon Innovations. I have a valid first-class ticket purchased through proper channels. I've provided multiple forms of identification and my frequent flyer information. I've been standing here calmly attempting to check in from my flight." The officer looked uncertain, glancing between Zora and the airline staff. "Perhaps we can access your company's travel portal to verify the booking?" Zora suggested professionally. "That won't be necessary," Calvin interjected. "We've decided that due to overbooking in first class, we'll need to downgrade your ticket to economy." "Overbooking?" Zora questioned. "You didn't mention that before. You were questioning the legitimacy of my ticket." "Company policy allows us to reassign seating as needed," Melissa stated flatly. "We can offer you an economy seat as a courtesy." The smug smile that accompanied courtesy made the implication clear. They were doing her a favor by allowing her on the plane at all. "I need to work during this flight and arrive rested for important business negotiations," Zora explained. "That's why I purchased a first-class ticket." "Well," Calvin said with finality, pushing an economy boarding pass across the counter, "this is what's available to you. You can take it or wait for another flight tomorrow." Knowing she couldn't afford to miss the Tokyo meeting, Zora reluctantly took the economy boarding pass. As she turned away from the counter, she noticed another black passenger being escorted from the premium security line, despite having proper documentation. In that moment, Zora realized this wasn't an isolated incident but a pattern. The humiliation burned, but something else emerged alongside it: determination. Throughout her life and career, she had encountered barriers meant to make her feel small, to remind her of boundaries others believed she shouldn't cross. But they had underestimated who they were dealing with. Zora Wilson hadn't built a billion-dollar company by accepting arbitrary limitations. As she walked toward the regular security line, her mind was already formulating a response, one that would transform this moment of injustice into a catalyst for change. What these airline employees didn't realize was that in attempting to put Zora in her place, they had unwittingly picked a fight with someone who had the resources, connections, and courage to challenge not just this incident, but the entire system that enabled it. Rather than proceeding to the general security line, Zora made a calculated decision. She turned and walked toward the airport's premium lounge, where her platinum traveler status, despite her downgraded ticket, still granted her access. Finding a quiet corner away from other travelers, she sank into a leather chair and allowed herself 30 seconds of the emotion she had suppressed during the confrontation. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the armrests. The familiar cocktail of humiliation, anger, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Throughout her career, Zora had faced countless microaggressions, but this blatant discrimination hit particularly hard because of what was at stake. Not just her dignity, but a business deal that could help millions of people. "Not here," she whispered to herself. "Not now." Zora closed her eyes and heard her grandmother's voice. "They expect your anger. It's how they justify their treatment. Give them your brilliance instead." The moment of vulnerability passed, replaced by strategic clarity. Zora had built her success not just on technological innovation, but on understanding systems and how to navigate them. This situation required the same analytical thinking she applied to business challenges. She reached for her phone and opened Her contacts, scrolling to Thomas Rodriguez, Horizon Innovation's chief legal counsel. Thomas answered on the second ring. "Zora, aren't you supposed to be in the air by now?" he asked. "Change of plans," she replied, her voice steady as she recounted the incident. "I need you to pull together a team immediately. We're dealing with both individual and potentially systemic discrimination at Skyline Airlines." Thomas's response was immediate and supportive. "I'm on it. Documentation first. Send me all your booking details, frequent flyer information, and a timeline of events while it's fresh. I'll have our civil rights specialist fly in from New York tonight. Thank you. Also, I need information on Skyline's history. Any discrimination complaints, settlements, pattern of behavior. Already typing the search terms," Thomas assured her. "What's your next move?" "Strategic pressure points," Zora replied. "I'm calling Eleanor Washington next." Eleanor Washington sat on the board of Global Aviation Partners, the parent company that held a controlling interest in Skyline Airlines. She and Zora had served together on a technology inclusion initiative the previous year. "Eleanor," Zora greeted when the call connected. "I'm at San Francisco International experiencing something that I believe will deeply concern Global Aviation's board." As Zora relayed the details, Eleanor's reaction shifted from surprise to alarm. "This is completely unacceptable," Eleanor stated firmly, "especially given the diversity commitments Gap made to shareholders last quarter. I'm contacting the chairman immediately. Document everything, Zora. This needs to be addressed at the highest level." Next, Zora texted her executive assistant, "Need you to pull contact info for top business reporters at WSJ, NYT Bloomberg. Also, access our corporate Instagram and Twitter accounts. Hold for further instructions." While waiting for Marcus's response, Zora began recording voice notes detailing the incident, names, times, exact phrases used. Having learned through experience, she knew documentation would be crucial. Her phone chimed with an incoming message from a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Wilson, I work at Skyline Customer Service. Saw what happened at check-in. This isn't first time. Have internal docs. Want to help. Meet at Blue Bottle Coffee near Gate 23. Zora considered the message carefully. It could be a setup to paint her as threatening staff, but it could also be a valuable insider perspective. She replied, "Thank you for reaching out. Can we start with a phone call instead?" 5 minutes later, she was speaking with Jamie Diaz, a customer service representative who had witnessed similar incidents repeatedly during 3 years at Skyline. "There's an unwritten policy," Jamie explained nervously. "Certain staff are trained to maintain the premium experience by finding reasons to question or downgrade passengers who don't fit the Skyline first-class profile. It's never explicitly about race in the training, but the pattern is clear." "Do you have any documentation of this?" Zora asked. "Training materials with coded language, internal emails about passenger profile management, and statistics on downgrades by demographic that were collected but never published. I've been saving copies." "Jamie, what you're describing could be evidence of systemic discrimination. Would you be willing to share these materials with my legal team?" "That's why I reached out," Jamie confirmed. "But I'd need protection. I can't lose my job. I have family depending on me." "My company can guarantee whistleblower protection, including legal representation and financial support if necessary," Zora assured them. "Send what you have to the secure email address I'm texting you now." By this point, Zora had transformed the lounge corner into an impromptu command center. Her laptop was open, her legal team was mobilizing, and a strategy was forming. What I had begun as a humiliating encounter was evolving into something much larger, an opportunity to challenge entrenched discrimination at a systemic level. Have you ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you, only to regret it later? Comment number 1 if you believe Zora should take this airline all the way down. Or number 2 if you think she should accept their offer of an economy seat and focus on her business deal. Hit that like button if you admire how she's responding with strategic action rather than just emotional reaction. Now, what exactly did the airline do next that turned this confrontation into a corporate crisis? Let's find out. While Zora orchestrated her response from the relative sanctuary of the premium lounge, Calvin Pierce and Melissa Baker were crafting their own narrative at the check-in counter. Their version portrayed Zora not as a calm, professional executive, defending her rights, but as an entitled, aggressive troublemaker threatening staff safety. She was belligerent and made threatening gestures, Calvin reported to his supervisor over the phone, while Melissa nodded in agreement. We felt physically intimidated. I believe she represents a security risk to the aircraft. This fabricated account triggered a series of escalating responses within Skyline's security protocols. Within 20 minutes, 2 airport security officers and a Skyline Airlines security representative entered the premium lounge, scanning the space until they spotted Zora. The officers approached her table with hands resting near their weapons, a posture typically reserved for genuine threats rather than business travelers making phone calls. "Ms. Wilson?" The lead officer addressed her. "We need to speak with you regarding an incident at the Skyline check-in counter." Zora looked up calmly, aware that numerous lounge patrons were now watching with interest. She closed her laptop and maintained direct eye contact with the officer. "Of course, officer. How can I help you?" The Skyline security representative, a man with Reynolds on his badge, stepped forward aggressively. "Ms. Wilson, you've been reported for threatening behavior toward our staff. We take the safety of our employees very seriously." "Threatening behavior?" Zora repeated, her tone measured but incredulous. I was completely calm throughout our interaction. I simply requested to board the flight I had purchased a ticket for. "According to our staff, you became agitated when they explained company policy, made threatening gestures, and implied consequences to their employment," Reynolds continued. Zora noticed several nearby passengers discreetly activating their phone cameras, recognizing the now familiar spectacle of a black person being confronted by authorities over dubious claims. "That account is entirely false," Zora stated clearly, ensuring her voice remained calm but audible to those recording. "I never raised my voice, made no threatening gestures, and simply provided my documentation when requested. I would be happy to provide the contact information for my attorney, who is already aware of the situation." The mention of an attorney caused the airport officers to exchange glances, but Reynolds pressed on. "We have multiple staff witnesses, Ms. Wilson. This kind of behavior could result in your removal from the airport and placement on our no-fly list. However, we're prepared to resolve this issue if you'll simply apologize to our staff and agree to discontinue any complaints about your seating arrangement." The audacity of the demand, that she apologize for experiencing discrimination, momentarily left Zora speechless. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a social media notification. The confrontation at the check-in counter had already been captured by another passenger and was gaining traction online with the caption, "Black executive harassed by Skyline Airlines staff, despite first-class ticket, flying while black." The airport security officers, noting Zora's composed demeanor contrasted with the threatening individual they'd been called to confront, began to look uncomfortable with their role in the situation. "Ma'am, is there someone from your party who can meet you here?" one officer asked, clearly seeking a de-escalation path. "My legal team is already en route," Zora replied, "and I've informed board members of Skyline's parent company about this situation." The mention of the parent company visibly rattled Reynolds, who stepped back and whispered something into his radio. Within minutes, a new figure hurried into the lounge. Marcus Thornton, Skyline's Regional Customer Experience Director, a polished executive in his 50s. "Ms. Wilson," Thornton greeted with an ingratiating smile, dismissing Reynolds with a subtle nod. "I've just been briefed about this unfortunate misunderstanding. Perhaps we could speak privately?" "I prefer to have this conversation with witnesses present," Zora replied, gesturing to the lounge around them. Thornton's smile tightened. "As you wish. Skyline Airlines values all our passengers and we regret any miscommunication that may have occurred. I'd like to offer you a voucher for future travel and an upgrade on your next booking with us." "This wasn't a miscommunication, Mr. Thornton," Zora corrected. "Your staff discriminated against me based on my race, questioned the legitimacy of my status without cause, downgraded my ticket without justification, then falsely reported me as threatening when I calmly objected. Thornton lowered his voice. These are serious allegations, Ms. Wilson. Accusations of discrimination can damage reputations, both corporate and personal. I'm offering a generous compensation package that many would find more than adequate. Along with a non-disclosure agreement, I presume, Zora asked, having encountered similar tactics before. Standard legal protection for all parties involved, Thornton confirmed, sliding a document across the table. Sign this, and we can put you on the next flight to Tokyo in first class with our sincere apologies. Zora glanced at the document, which indeed contained clauses prohibiting her from discussing the incident publicly or pursuing any legal action. The compensation offered was substantial, enough to silence many passengers who lacked her resources. Mr. Thornton, I'm not interested in vouchers or NDAs. I'm interested in accountability and systemic change. Thornton's demeanor shifted, the accommodating smile replaced by a colder expression. Ms. Wilson, let me be frank. Passengers who become problematic to our operations sometimes find themselves experiencing travel difficulties across multiple airlines. The industry has cooperative security protocols. It would be unfortunate if your business travel were to be complicated by security flags in the system. The veiled threat hung in the air between them. Thornton was essentially suggesting that if Zora didn't accept the hush money, she might find herself on no-fly lists or subjected to random security checks that would make her international business travel virtually impossible. What Thornton didn't know was that during this conversation, Zora had been recording audio on her phone, and Thomas Rodriguez had been listening to the entire exchange. The thinly veiled threat had just given her legal team additional leverage. Are you threatening me with illegal blacklisting if I don't conceal your company's discriminatory practices, Mr. Thornton? Zora asked clearly, ensuring the recording would capture his response. Thornton suddenly seemed aware of the precariousness of his position. He glanced around, noticing the onlookers, many of whom were now openly recording the interaction. You're misinterpreting my concerns for your future convenience, Ms. Wilson, he backpedaled. I'm simply trying to resolve this situation amicably. Then perhaps you should focus on addressing the actual discrimination rather than attempting to silence the person who experienced it, Zora suggested calmly. As if on cue, a notification appeared on Thornton's phone. His face paled as he read the message. Excuse me, he said abruptly, standing. I need to take this. As Thornton hurried away to answer his call, a young woman approached Zora's table. She introduced herself as Aisha Johnson, a business consultant who had witnessed the entire interaction. That was incredible, Aisha said quietly. The way you stood your ground, most people would have taken the vouchers and the NDA. This isn't just about one flight or one incident, Zora replied. It's about a pattern that affects countless travelers who don't have the platform or resources to fight back. I recorded everything, Aisha offered. If you need another witness, I travel weekly for business, and I've seen Skyline pull similar tactics with other black executives. Zora thanked her and exchanged contact information. As Aisha walked away, Zora's phone lit up with a message from Eleanor Washington. Board chairman informed. Executive team in panic mode. Hold your ground. Reinforcements coming. Across the terminal, Marcus Thornton was engaged in an intense phone conversation with Skyline's corporate headquarters. What had begun as a routine passenger management situation had escalated into a potential corporate crisis involving one of the most influential black executives in the technology sector. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of Skyline's troubles. The power network that Zora had spent years building was about to demonstrate its full force. At precisely 2:45 p.m., the dynamics of the confrontation shifted dramatically when a group of 3 impeccably dressed professionals strode purposefully through the premium lounge entrance. Leading the trio was Jada Washington, Horizon Innovations, senior legal counsel specializing in civil rights cases. Behind her walked Michael Chen, the company's head of corporate communications, and Dr. Ayanna Johnson, a prominent sociologist known for her expert testimony in discrimination cases. Zora stood to greet them, the reunion creating a visible power shift in the lounge. No longer was she a solitary figure being pressured by airline representatives. She now commanded a formidable team. We came as quickly as we could, Jada stated, setting her briefcase on the table. I've already filed preservation of evidence notices to prevent the airline from deleting security footage or communications. Michael Chen stepped forward. Social media is exploding with this story. The video from the check-in counter has over 100,000 shares already. Major news outlets are reaching out for statements. This revelation explained the increasingly anxious expressions on the faces of Skyline staff, watching from across the lounge. What they had assumed would be a routine case of passenger intimidation had transformed into a public relations crisis, unfolding in real time. Jada immediately took charge of the legal aspects. We've identified 11 similar complaints against Skyline in the past 18 months, all involving black passengers with first-class tickets being downgraded or subjected to excessive scrutiny. While Zora's team established their command center, activity was erupting across multiple fronts. Eleanor Washington had convened an emergency call with key members of Global Aviation Partners Board. The parent company's leadership, suddenly, faced with a discrimination scandal involving a high-profile executive, found themselves divided between damage control and substantive action. Simultaneously, Zora's industry connections began leveraging their own influence. The CEO of a Fortune 100 technology company, one that spent millions annually on corporate travel, personally called Skyline's chief executive officer. "Richard, you have exactly 1 hour to resolve this situation appropriately before we begin transitioning our corporate accounts to your competitors," the tech CEO stated bluntly. "Zora Wilson isn't just some random passenger you can bully. She's respected throughout the industry, and how you treat her reflects how you'd treat any of our executives." Similar calls flooded in from other corporate leaders, particularly those committed to diversity and inclusion initiatives. Within 90 minutes, Skyline's booking system registered a 5% drop in new reservations as individual travelers and smaller companies began canceling flights in solidarity. Online, the hashtag #YourJusticeForZora was trending nationally, with business leaders, celebrities, and everyday travelers sharing their own experiences of discrimination in air travel. The conversation quickly expanded beyond Zora's individual experience to address the systemic issues plaguing the industry. Former Skyline employees, emboldened by the public scrutiny, began coming forward with their own accounts. A former flight attendant revealed on Twitter, "We were trained to use code words for passengers who didn't match the Skyline premium image. It was never explicitly about race, but the implications were clear in practice." This public testimony aligned perfectly with the internal documents Jamie Diaz had provided to Zora's legal team, evidence that was now being carefully cataloged and analyzed. The situational gravity escalated further when a representative from the Federal Aviation Administration arrived at the airport, responding to concerns about Skyline's compliance with non-discrimination regulations in air carrier operations. The presence of a federal regulator transformed what Skyline had hoped to dismiss as a customer service issue into a potential regulatory investigation. In the premium lounge, Zora offered protection to sympathetic Skyline staff who approached her team with information. "We can guarantee legal representation and job placement assistance if you experience retaliation," she assured them. "Your insights are crucial to addressing the systemic issues here." These assurances yielded valuable results as multiple employees provided testimonies about discriminatory practices they had witnessed or been instructed to implement. Each account strengthened the emerging pattern of behavior that Zora's legal team was documenting. As trading opened on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, where Global Aviation Partners was dual-listed, the company's stock price began to slide in response to the emerging controversy. Financial analysts issued hasty notes to investors addressing the potential impact of discrimination allegations on the airline's global reputation and business prospects. The pressure on Skyline intensified from every direction: legal, financial, regulatory, and public relations. What had begun as a routine instance of discrimination, something the airline had apparently managed to contain many times before, had evolved into a multidimensional crisis that threatened the company's fundamental operations. In the midst of this escalating situation, Zora remained remarkably composed. While her team managed the various aspects of the response, she focused on a crucial realization. This moment represented an opportunity not just for personal justice, but for industry-wide accountability. "We need to push beyond individual consequences," she instructed her team. "I want structural changes, transparent reporting of passenger treatment data, independent audits of service delivery across demographics, mandatory bias training with measurable outcomes. Jada nodded in agreement. We're drafting those demands now. With the leverage we're building, we can push for industry standards, not just company-specific remedies. As evening approached, Skyline executives found themselves in an increasingly untenable position. Their initial strategy of intimidation had backfired spectacularly. Their subsequent attempt at financial settlement and silencing had been rejected and exposed. Now they faced a coordinated pressure campaign from multiple stakeholders with the resources and determination to sustain it indefinitely. A nervous Skyline representative approached Zora's table. Ms. Wilson, our CEO Richard Whitfield has requested a video conference with you immediately. He's currently in Chicago but wants to address this situation personally. Zora exchanged glances with her team before responding. Tell Mr. Whitfield I'd be happy to speak with him, alongside my legal counsel, and with the conversation recorded for transparency. As the representative hurried away to relay the conditions, Michael Chen leaned toward Zora. They're panicking. The conversation is shifting from if they'll make concessions to how many. Zora nodded, but her expression remained serious. This isn't about winning concessions. It's about changing a culture that treats people differently based on how they look. Every person who boards a plane deserves the same respect and service, regardless of their race. The ripple effects of Zora's stand continued to expand, reaching beyond Skyline to prompt soul-searching throughout the industry. Other airlines began issuing statements about their own commitment to equitable treatment, aware that they might be the next to face scrutiny. By leveraging her position, resources, and network, Zora had transformed a moment of personal humiliation into a catalyst for systemic examination. But the battle was far from over. Skyline's leadership was already formulating their counter-strategy, one that would test Zora's resolve and resources even further. As night fell over San Francisco International Airport, the Skyline Airlines crisis management team assembled in their corporate headquarters executive boardroom in Chicago. CEO Richard Whitfield, a silver-haired man with an imperious demeanor, sat at the head of the table surrounded by his executive team, external PR consultants, and a battalion of attorneys. How the hell did we get here? Whitfield demanded, slamming his fist on the polished mahogany table. One passenger. One. And we're facing a stockholder panic, boycott threats, and regulatory scrutiny? Patricia Winters, Skyline's chief marketing officer, cleared her throat. Sir, Ms. Wilson isn't just any passenger. She's a prominent black female CEO with significant influence across multiple industries. The optics of this situation. I don't care about her resume, Whitfield interrupted. I care about containing this before it causes irreparable damage to our brand and stock value. What's our strategy? Gregory Palmer, head of the crisis management firm hastily retained by Skyline, stepped forward with practiced confidence. We need to reframe the narrative immediately. Ms. Wilson may have genuine grievances, but perception is reality in crisis management. Palmer activated a presentation titled Narrative Control Strategy. The first slide outlined a multi-pronged approach to undermine Zora's credibility without appearing overtly racist. We deploy these tactics simultaneously, Palmer explained. First, we paint Ms. Wilson as the angry black woman stereotype. We find staff who can testify that she was aggressive and unreasonable, regardless of what actually happened. This undermines her credibility with certain demographic segments. The executives nodded as Palmer continued, advancing to the next slide. Second, we selectively edit security footage to support our narrative. We can remove portions showing our staff's dismissive behavior and focus on any moments where Ms. Wilson could be perceived as emotional. Our technical team is already working on this. Whitfield interjected, Is that legal? Editing footage that might be subpoenaed? The lead attorney responded smoothly, We're not destroying evidence, merely curating our public response materials. The complete footage remains preserved in our archives. This semantic distinction appeared to satisfy Whitfield, who gestured for Palmer to continue. Third, we flood social media with counter-narratives. We have a network of paid commentators and influencers who can question Ms. Wilson's motives, suggesting this is about publicity or financial gain rather than discrimination. Comments like, "Why make everything about race?" and "just another wealthy" executive throwing her weight around can significantly dilute public sympathy. The strategy continued with increasingly aggressive tactics. Palmer outlined plans to pressure witnesses to recant or modify their accounts, using Skyline's position as a major employer to subtle effect. Most people won't risk their jobs to support a stranger's discrimination claim no matter what they saw. Perhaps most disturbing was the directive to assemble a team of private investigators to examine every aspect of Zora's past, personal and professional, searching for anything that could be used to discredit her. "Everyone has skeletons," Palmer assured the group. Financial irregularities, personal indiscretions, business decisions that can be reframed negatively. We find these and leak them strategically to shift focus from Skyline's actions to Ms. Wilson's character. Meanwhile, Robert Kensington, Skyline's politically connected board chairman, had already begun making calls to regulatory contacts, attempting to influence any potential investigation before it gained momentum. "I've spoken with my contact at the Transportation Department," Kensington reported. "He understands the delicacy of these situations and the potential for misinterpretation of standard airline protocols. He'll ensure any inquiry is handled with appropriate restraint." As the executive team embraced these increasingly unethical counter-strategies, a junior staff member named Sarah Chen sat quietly in the corner, ostensibly taking notes but actually recording the meeting on her phone. As Horizon Innovation's newest mole within Skyline's organization, recruited through industry connections hours earlier, she was documenting every word of their planned character assassination and evidence manipulation. While Skyline's leadership believed they were regaining control of the narrative, they were actually digging themselves deeper into a scandal that would soon extend far beyond a single incident of discrimination. The following morning, major news outlets across the country led with a startling headline: "Exposed: Skyline Airline's secret system for discriminating against black passengers." The revelation wasn't just about Zora Wilson's experience anymore. It detailed an elaborate company-wide practice of racial profiling that had been operating for years. The investigation, fueled by documents provided by multiple Skyline whistleblowers, revealed damning evidence. Internal memos dated 3 years prior outlined what executives called passenger profile management, a euphemism for systematic discrimination. One particularly incriminating document from a regional director instructed staff to maintain our premium cabin atmosphere by ensuring passenger demographics align with our brand identity. Training materials showed customer service representatives were taught coded language to deny services without explicitly mentioning race. Terms like non-traditional premium traveler and customer fit assessment served as thin veils for racial profiling. Statistical analysis conducted by independent researchers using the leaked data showed black passengers with first-class tickets were 19 times more likely to be downgraded or subjected to additional verification requirements than white passengers with identical status and booking methods. Former employees testified about a secretive scoring system used to evaluate passengers' suitability for premium cabins, with factors including appearance, articulation, and alignment with Skyline's premium image, criteria that consistently disadvantaged non-white travelers. Perhaps most shocking was the revelation that Skyline had been tracking these disparities internally, with quarterly reports showing the racial breakdown of passenger reallocations. These reports were discovered in a secure executive file share uncovered by Sarah Chen. As these revelations spread across traditional and social media, the discrimination at Skyline was placed in the larger context of American corporate culture. Dr. Ayanna Johnson appeared on morning news programs explaining how systematic discrimination often hides behind corporate policies and coded language. "What we're seeing at Skyline isn't unique. It's just been exposed," Dr. Johnson explained. "Many corporations maintain environments of exclusion while publicly claiming commitment to diversity. This case provides a rare glimpse into how discrimination is operationalized and institutionalized in corporate America." The economic impact of this discrimination was also brought to light. A hastily conducted industry study estimated that black business travelers collectively lost millions of dollars in productivity annually due to discriminatory treatment in air travel, from unwarranted security delays to seating reallocation that prevented them from working effectively during flights. Further investigation revealed connections between Skyline's executive leadership and political organizations known for opposing civil rights legislation. Corporate donation records showed that Skyline had contributed substantially to lobbying efforts against expanded transportation equality regulations. As the evidence mounted, personal stories from discriminated passengers across the country flooded social media platforms. A respected neurosurgeon shared how he was regularly asked to verify his first-class tickets despite traveling weekly for medical consultations. A federal judge described being asked to move from her rightfully purchased seat to accommodate a white passenger. A prominent musician detailed how his entire band was dispersed throughout a flight, despite having booked their seats together months in advance. These accounts transformed the conversation from an isolated incident involving a CEO to a moment of national reckoning about transportation equity. Zora found herself at the center of a movement she hadn't intended to start, but was uniquely positioned to lead. The Federal Aviation Administration, now under intense public pressure, announced a comprehensive investigation into discriminatory practices across all major airlines, with Skyline as the initial focus. The Department of Transportation similarly initiated a civil rights compliance review, while several state attorneys general opened their own inquiries. The stock price of global aviation partners plummeted as investors recognized the potential financial impact of lawsuits, penalties, and damaged reputation. Financial analysts downgraded the stock, citing material regulatory and legal risks previously undisclosed to investors. For Skyline's leadership, the situation had spiraled beyond their control. Their planned counter-narrative strategy had been preemptively exposed by Sarah Chen's recording of the crisis meeting, leaving them unable to implement their character assassination campaign against Zora without confirming their unethical intentions. As public outrage intensified, Skyline's board of directors found themselves under pressure from institutional investors concerned about both ethical violations and financial repercussions. Several board members privately reached out to Eleanor, Washington, seeking a path to resolution that might salvage their investments and reputations. Throughout this rapid escalation, Zora maintained her focus on systemic change rather than personal vindication. Her team established a resource center for other travelers to document their experiences of discrimination, creating a database that would support broader advocacy efforts beyond this single case. This was never about one seat on one flight, Zora explained during a brief press statement. It's about dismantling systems that determine who belongs in which spaces based on the color of their skin rather than the ticket in their hand. The revelation that most shocked the public wasn't that discrimination occurred. Many minority travelers had experienced it firsthand, but rather the extent to which it had been systematized, quantified, and integrated into standard business operations. What many had experienced as painful, isolated incidents was now exposed as part of a deliberate corporate strategy. This understanding fundamentally changed the conversation about corporate responsibility and accountability. Companies across industries began internal reviews of their own profile management systems, fearful of becoming the next Skyline. For Skyline Airlines, the mounting pressure from regulators, investors, customers, and the public created an untenable situation. Something would have to give, and soon. The gleaming glass and steel Skyline headquarters in Chicago seemed designed to intimidate, its soaring atrium and security checkpoints creating a fortress of corporate power. Yet on this particular morning, it was the executives inside who felt besieged as Zora Wilson and her team were escorted to the executive floor for the emergency board meeting. The company had initially proposed a private settlement discussion, but Zora had insisted on addressing the full board and executive team. Her conditions had been non-negotiable: complete transparency, no NDAs, and substantive discussion of systemic reforms. As Zora entered the boardroom, the contrast was immediately striking. Around the massive table sat 24 people, 21 of them white men, 2 white women, and 1 Asian man. Their collective discomfort was palpable as Zora and her diverse team took their places at the opposite end of the table. CEO Richard Whitfield attempted to seize control of the narrative immediately. He stood and offered what he clearly considered a magnanimous opening. Ms. Wilson, on behalf of Skyline Airlines, I want to personally apologize for your recent negative experience, he began, his tone suggesting he was bestowing a great favor. We take customer satisfaction very seriously, and clearly there was a breakdown in our service protocols. The deliberate avoidance of terms like discrimination or racism was obvious to everyone present. Whitfield continued, "We're prepared to offer you significant compensation along with our premium membership for life as a gesture of goodwill." Zora remained silent, her expression unchanged as Whitfield concluded, "We're confident we can put this unfortunate incident behind us and move forward positively." The silence that followed was deafening. Board members shifted uncomfortably as seconds stretched into a full minute without response from Zora or her team. Finally, Zora spoke, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Mr. Whitfield, I didn't come here for apologies, compensation, or premium membership. I came here because your airline doesn't just have a service problem. It has a systemic racism problem that has been documented, institutionalized, and defended by this very leadership team." She nodded to Michael Chen, who distributed folders to everyone present. "These contain just a fraction of the evidence we've accumulated, demonstrating that what happened to me wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern practiced over years." Board members began examining the contents with expressions ranging from shock to resignation. The documentation was comprehensive. Internal memos, statistical analyses, employee testimonies, and the recorded strategy session revealing their planned character assassination campaign against Zora. "While you were planning to discredit me," Zora continued, "we were building a case that goes far beyond my personal experience. The question now isn't whether discrimination occurred, but how your company will be held accountable for it." Richard Whitfield's face had grown increasingly flushed. "These documents were obtained illegally. This is corporate espionage and theft of proprietary information. Our legal team will—" "Your legal team," Jada Washington interjected smoothly, "should advise you that whistleblower protections apply to employees who expose unlawful discrimination. Furthermore, evidence of attempting to destroy or manipulate records relevant to a federal investigation would constitute obstruction, a criminal offense." Eleanor Washington, representing Global Aviation Partners, spoke up from her position, midway down the table. "The parent company's board is deeply concerned about these allegations and the evidence supporting them. We have a fiduciary duty to address practices that create material legal and financial risk." This explicit lack of support from a key board member visibly rattled Whitfield. He attempted to regain control of the meeting. "We acknowledge there may be opportunities to enhance our diversity and inclusion practices," he conceded reluctantly. "We're prepared to engage a consultant to review our protocols and suggest improvements." Zora shook her head. "Consultants and reviews are insufficient. What's required is a fundamental transformation of your company culture, practices, and leadership." She stood and walked to the front of the room, commanding the space with quiet confidence. "For generations, Black Americans have been told where they can sit, on buses, in restaurants, in theaters, and now on airplanes. Each time we've purchased a ticket for a particular seat, only to be told, not for people like you." The room was completely silent as she continued. "Today, I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm speaking for the doctor who missed his daughter's birthday because your staff decided he didn't look like he belonged in first class and made him miss his connection. For the attorney who was humiliated in front of her clients when your flight attendant questioned her ticket. For the student who saved for months to visit his dying grandmother, only to be bumped without cause." Zora placed her hands on the table and leaned forward. "What you may not have realized when your staff decided to discriminate against me is that my company, Horizon Innovations, manages investment funds for several of your largest institutional investors. We've been considering diversifying our transportation industry holdings." This revelation sent a ripple of alarm through the board members. Several began whispering urgently to each other. "In fact," Zora continued, "we were in preliminary discussions about acquiring a minority stake in Global Aviation Partners. Those discussions are now on hold, pending the outcome of this situation." Richard Whitfield blanched. You're threatening a hostile takeover because of a seating misunderstanding? No, Mr. Whitfield. I'm informing you of business decisions being reconsidered in light of documented systemic discrimination that creates both ethical and financial liability. There's a difference. Zora laid out her non-negotiable demands: immediate removal of executives who had knowledge of or participated in discriminatory practices, a complete overhaul of passenger screening and seating policies with transparent reporting, substantial investment in anti-discrimination training with measurable outcomes, financial restitution to affected passengers, and the establishment of an independent oversight committee with real authority. Until these measures are implemented, Zora concluded, I've instructed my team to proceed with the regulatory complaints, class action lawsuit, and, most importantly, to advise the thousands of business travelers who use Horizon's corporate booking platform to avoid Skyline Airlines entirely. The implications were clear. Zora had the power to effectively ground Skyline's operations not through regulatory action alone, but through economic impact. As the gravity of the situation became apparent, the board split into factions. Some directors, particularly those with diverse business interests, recognized the existential threat to the airline and began suggesting compromise. Others, led by Chairman Robert Kensington, remained resistant. This is nothing short of extortion, Kensington declared. One passenger demanding the restructuring of an entire company over a perceived slight. Perceived? Zora repeated. Your own data shows that black first-class ticket holders are 19 times more likely to be downgraded than white passengers. That's not perception. That's measurable discrimination. The debate grew heated as board members calculated their personal liability, reputation risks, and financial exposure. Throughout, Zora remained composed, knowing that the evidence and leverage were on her side. Finally, a senior board member named William Hayes, who had remained silent until now, addressed the room. I've sat on this board for 15 years, he said gravely. If even half of what's in these documents is accurate, we've failed in our oversight duties. Ms. Wilson isn't just making reasonable demands. She's offering us a path to accountability that's likely more generous than what we'd face from regulators or the courts. This assessment from a respected board veteran shifted the momentum. After 4 hours of tense negotiation, the board voted 14-10 to accept Zora's core demands, with a committee established to implement the required changes. As the meeting concluded, Richard Whitfield made one final attempt to reassert his authority, approaching Zora with artificial cordiality. We look forward to putting this misunderstanding behind us, he said, extending his hand for a conciliatory handshake. Zora looked at his hand but didn't take it. This isn't concluded, Mr. Whitfield. It's just beginning. I'll be watching the implementation of every agreed measure, and until I'm satisfied that real change has occurred, not just policy documents, but measurable transformation in how your airline treats all passengers, every Skyline flight remains grounded. With that declaration, Zora turned and left the boardroom, leaving behind a leadership team confronting the consequences of discrimination they had enabled, ignored, or actively promoted. The message was clear. Accountability had arrived, and it wouldn't be placated with empty gestures or hollow apologies. The ripple effects of Zora Wilson's stand against Skyline Airlines extended far beyond that contentious boardroom confrontation. Within hours of the emergency board meeting, aviation channels buzzed with unprecedented news. Skyline's entire fleet had been grounded, with all flights canceled for a minimum of 48 hours. The official reason given was operational review, but industry insiders and travelers recognized the truth. A major airline had been brought to a standstill by its own discriminatory practices and one passenger's refusal to accept them. Travelers stranded at airports across the country created a public relations nightmare, with news crews capturing their frustration. But something unexpected began happening at terminal counters. As passengers learned why the airline had been grounded, information spreading rapidly through social media, many expressed support rather than anger. I'd rather be delayed than fly with a company that discriminates, one elderly white woman told a CNN reporter at O'Hare International Airport. It's about time someone held them accountable. The economic impact was immediate and severe. Skyline lost millions in revenue with each grounded day, while competitors scrambled to accommodate displaced passengers. Wall Street analysts issued urgent updates, and global aviation partners' stock plummeted to a 5-year low. This financial pressure forced decisive action. 3 days after the fleet grounding, Skyline's board announced a comprehensive leadership overhaul. CEO Richard Whitfield retired effective immediately, along with 5 other executives implicated in discriminatory practices. Calvin Pierce and Melissa Baker, the employee who had initiated the discrimination against Zora, were terminated for violations of company ethical standards. The new interim CEO, Dr. Maya Richardson, a respected aviation industry veteran and the first Black woman to lead a major airline, addressed employees and the public in her first official communication. What happened at Skyline wasn't just a failure of policy, but a failure of values. Our renewal begins with acknowledging that reality and taking concrete steps to address it. Under Dr. Richardson's leadership, Skyline implemented comprehensive reforms. A transparent seating allocation system was developed, with quarterly public reporting of passenger demographics and treatment metrics across all service classes. Any statistical disparities would trigger automatic review by an independent auditor. Every employee underwent mandatory anti-discrimination training developed in consultation with civil rights organizations and travel equity advocates. Unlike previous corporate diversity initiatives, this program included concrete evaluation criteria and consequences for non-compliance. A whistleblower protection program was established with significant rewards for employees who reported discriminatory practices. Jamie Diaz, whose initial courage in sharing internal documents had been crucial to exposing the systemic issues, was publicly recognized and appointed to lead the new passenger equity division. Financial restitution was offered to hundreds of passengers identified through booking records as having potentially experienced discriminatory treatment. Rather than requiring them to prove discrimination had occurred, Skyline reversed the burden of proof, acknowledging its systemic issues and offering compensation proactively. Most significantly, Skyline created an independent oversight committee composed of civil rights attorneys, travel equity advocates, and affected passengers. This committee had unprecedented access to company data and operations, with authority to recommend binding corrective actions. 8 days after the initial confrontation at the San Francisco check-in counter, Skyline's fleet returned to the skies, but with a transformed corporate culture and explicit accountability mechanisms. For Zora, the resolution brought both vindication and responsibility. As she finally boarded her rescheduled flight to Tokyo in first class on the newly reformed Skyline Airlines, she reflected on how a moment of personal humiliation had catalyzed industry-wide examination. "Ms. Wilson, welcome aboard," the top first-class flight attendant greeted her with genuine warmth. "We're honored to have you flying with us today." The simple human dignity of being welcomed rather than questioned represented exactly the transformation Zora had fought for. Not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel they didn't belong. In the year that followed, the Skyline Standard became a benchmark for corporate accountability in addressing systemic discrimination. Other airlines proactively reviewed their own practices, fearful of becoming the next cautionary tale. Transportation equity advocates cited the case in congressional testimony, supporting stronger civil rights enforcement in aviation. Zora leveraged her heightened profile to establish the Transportation Equity Foundation, providing legal support to travelers experiencing discrimination and advocating for industry-wide reforms. The foundation partnered with business schools to develop case studies on corporate accountability and the business costs of discrimination. Perhaps most meaningfully, Zora established a mentorship program for young Black executives navigating predominantly white corporate environments. In their monthly meetings, she shared not just strategies for professional advancement, but techniques for maintaining dignity and advocating for systemic change when confronting discrimination. During one such mentoring session, a young woman asked Zora if she regretted the confrontation, given how it had temporarily pulled her away from her primary business responsibilities. "Not for a moment," Zora replied. "The Tokyo deal was important, and we eventually secured it. But some battles transcend business. When you have the platform and resources to challenge systemic injustice, that becomes its own responsibility." She smiled at the circle of young faces around her. Remember, it's not just about earning your seat at the table. It's about ensuring the table is accessible to everyone who deserves to be there. On the one-year anniversary of the incident, Horizon Innovations and Skyline Airlines announced a groundbreaking partnership, a technology platform that would help transportation companies identify and address potential bias in their customer service algorithms and human decision-making processes. At the press conference announcing the initiative, Dr. Richardson acknowledged how far Skyline had come. A year ago, we were a case study in corporate discrimination. Today, we're working to become a model for corporate transformation. The journey isn't complete, but our direction has fundamentally changed. Zora concluded the event with words that resonated far beyond the aviation industry. True equity isn't achieved through single victories or policy documents. It's built through consistent accountability, measurable outcomes, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. Most importantly, it requires recognizing that no one should ever have to justify their presence in spaces they have legitimately earned, whether that's a seat in first class, a place in the boardroom, or any other table where decisions are made. As she left the podium to enthusiastic applause, Zora carried the same quiet determination that had sustained her from that first confrontation at the check-in counter. The battle for one seat had evolved into a movement for equitable access to all spaces, a transformation that would benefit generations to come. Have you ever stood up against discrimination or witnessed someone else do so? What was the outcome? Your experiences matter in this ongoing conversation about equity and justice. Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it resonated with you. Together, we can create a world where everyone is treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance. Thank you for watching, and remember, one person's courage can transform an entire system. Zora Wilson's journey teaches us that confronting discrimination requires both courage and strategy. Individual dignity matters, but lasting change demands systemic transformation. When facing injustice, document everything, build alliances, and focus on structural solutions rather than personal vindication. Power doesn't just come from positions or titles, but from networks, knowledge, and unwavering determination. The most effective advocacy combines moral clarity with strategic leverage. Remember that silence often perpetuates discrimination, while speaking up can reveal how many others share your experiences. True leadership means using your privilege to create pathways for others, recognizing that access to opportunity shouldn't depend on appearance. Most importantly, Zora shows us that accountability isn't punishment. It's the necessary foundation for creating genuinely inclusive spaces where everyone is treated with equal dignity and respect.